Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the, as promised, first video on the training program I'm going to be using to improve myself following this kind of, falling off, this wasting away, this disgraceful loss of 20 pounds of mostly muscle, unfortunately. So like I said, I have a unique approach, something I've developed over the last really 10 years in the field, and it kind of happened accidentally. It came because I began to recognize patterns and I began to experiment with them. And, over the course of the last several years, it's kind of developed into this. All right. So like I said, this is an approach I don't think you've seen before. It's something unique. And I just want to introduce the approach first, and then we can talk a little bit about it. In this video, just get an overview of what I'm going to be talking about in the next videos, what you can expect. So I call this the synergy protocol. Synergy meaning we have a lot of different things working together for an amplified effect. All right. So just a quick overview as I have written here. This is a training approach in which working to improve multiple domains of fitness at once will yield greater results in all of these areas in a shorter time than training for any single one individually. And then after you say something like that, you got to back it the fuck up, because that sounds like a fucking outrageous claim, right? And it kind of is. We have rules, we have principles in the world of strength and conditioning that, quite frankly, this kind of laughs in the face at. But the thing is, it really doesn't. And that's why I'm making these videos, because this approach is a very different sort of approach, and it requires you to look at things in a different way. It requires you to categorize things differently than in ways that you weren't taught. So I want to talk more about that. So first of all, let's talk more about these domains of fitness. What do I mean? Specifically for me, in my state right now, I need to build more muscle mass. I need to get stronger. I need more muscle endurance. I also need to improve my cardiovascular endurance. Wow, that's a whole lot. But let's take a look at these things. We need more muscular strength. That's for sure. I lost a lot sitting in bed and not eating for days and days and days. And, I lost a lot of weight as well. So along with strength, we're going to need size. That's called hypertrophy. I definitely want more muscle size. I'm too light. On top of that, I need more muscle endurance. I am a kettlebell lifter after all, so really I am an endurance athlete. And then further down the line, not yet, but in the not so distant future, I have to begin to improve my cardiovascular endurance, because that's the foundation also. The strength and the cardiovascular endurance are the foundation for kettlebell lifting, right? The better those things are, the lighter the weights feel, the more cardiovascular capacity I have, the better I'm going to lift. So I need to work on all this at once, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it well. I'm going to do it quickly. Now, if you're in this field, if you study anatomy, you study strength conditioning, you're going to be like, this is a load of shit. How the fuck is he supposed to do that? That breaks all the rules. And let's talk about those rules. We have one rule, one principle, one of several principles in strength conditioning called specificity. All right? And specificity basically says, in order to get good at something, you have to practice it. So when it comes to skills, all right, that makes sense. If I'm going to play tennis, I want to get better at tennis, I play tennis. Well, when I'm talking about these things, though, there are very specific guidelines as to how to get better at them. For example, we know with strength, heavy weights are good. Sets of 1 to 5 reps are good. Longer rest periods are good. Barbells are good. They're better than tiny weights, right? Big movements are good. They're better than isolation, all right? But when we talk about muscle endurance, it's very different. Here, many repetitions, long sets are good. Low rest periods are good. Lighter weights are good, okay? It's a very different approach. Hypertrophy, the same thing. Moderate weights are good. Very low rest periods are good. Going to failure is good. Not so much in these two. So right away, specificity is already dictating that these things require different stuff to get better. Maybe even different equipment. If you're using the same equipment, different rep schemes, different rest periods, things of that nature. So one person might say, or go, well, you know what? I'm going to specifically get good at all 3 of these at once. And, maybe you'd be right for a little while, but there's another principle of training. It's not a principle, but it's a phenomenon, and that's called training interference. And training interference basically means that the adaptations of one of these things can interfere with the adaptations of another. So if I'm training specifically for a marathon, that's probably going to be detrimental to powerlifting, right? My body needs to be as light as possible. I don't want too much fat, switch muscle fiber. That's going to basically be a, dead weight. I'm using fat predominantly and sugars for fuel. It's a very different type of adaptation. Muscle gain is going to hinder me, whereas a power lifter putting on muscle within his weight class is a good thing. Lifting heavy weights, moving slowly is not such a bad thing. There's two completely different adaptations going on there, and one might interfere with the other. Typically speaking, the example given for training interference is training for strength and endurance simultaneously. And as I just kind of went over them briefly, you've heard the demand of each of these things are quite different. The specificity of training for each is quite different. So how the hell does this work? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. Over the course of the next couple of videos, I'm going to be kind of laying out a different approach to categorizing different types of fitness, to kind of approaching how we look at some common terminology. For example, the second video I'm going to do, the next video I'm going to do is going to be on energy systems. And following that, and the reason I'm doing that is to kind of segue into the first real principle of this, which is kind of re-examining what we mean by intensity. Intensity being how much effort, resistance, weight you're using. High intensity meaning a lot. Low intensity meaning very little or none or body weight or whatever. So like, for example, a squat, a barbell back squat for 1 or 2 reps, super intense. For 5, intense, but less so. For a set of 15, it's like of moderate intensity. If you're doing body weight squats, it's low intensity. You see? We're going to redefine that. We're going to look at intensity in a different way. We're also going to look at the domains of fitness in a different way, and that's going to be in a separate video. And once we begin to lay these things out and kind of examine them in a different way, I think you're going to see that these things are more closely knit, and there are better relationships between them than we really realize. All right? So how did I come up with this? Did I just make it up or what? Well, as I've said, it's kind of happened over the course of the last 10 years. And it started when I began kind of combining different types of training. Specifically in about 2011 when I got into kettlebell sport lifting and began combining the kettlebell sport lifting with the traditional strength training. Stuff like 5x5s, 5-3-1, shit like that. Well, when I began to combine the strength training and the kettlebell lifting, I began to see some pretty astounding results. Then later on, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of professional and collegiate athletes, maybe even some Olympic athletes. But bottom line, a lot of times these athletes don't have a lot of time to get good at things. They basically go, all right, the season's coming, we need to get in general shape. Make us in shape so we can play our sport. And, a lot of times we made these very complex protocols that addressed a lot of these things at once. We saw really good results. There was one instance where we were preparing an NFL combine athlete, a guy out of college, out of Rutgers. We were preparing him for the bench press. And if you don't know, in the NFL combine, you have to bench press 225 as many times as you can. Well, hey, I'm a kettlebell lifter. I know something about using the same amount of weight for as many reps as possible. What we ended up doing was applying some of the training principles I use in kettlebell sport to his bench press. And we combined that with very simple traditional strength training. And the results were absolutely fucking phenomenal. I'm not going to give names or anything like that, but, because I don't know who wants me talking about them or not. But anyway, we saw absolutely immense results. That got me thinking and kind of reanalyzing this information. And, that was back in, I think it was 2015. And since then, I've had a long time, 5 years, to kind of further refine that system. To the point where, like I said, I've kind of been through something like this before where my body's kind of, fallen apart. And I've used it on myself, and the results were mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. So guess what? You're going to get to see that firsthand. Don't just take my word for it. You're going to see it. You're going to see me weigh in. You're going to see my body change in a very rapid fashion. All right? So the next video, as I said, is going to go into energy systems, talking about how the body creates its energy molecule, ATP. It's very important because we have to identify these systems to grasp the first major concept of the Synergy protocol, which is kind of redefining how we approach intensity. All right? I think we've all seen the board. All right? Of course, you can always pause it and get the information that way. And hopefully you will join me for the first lecture, Lecture 1, on the body's energy system.